Hi, and welcome back to Crafter's Grove. I absolutely love Halloween, but I have a big pet peeve with Halloween. It produces so many cheap plastic materials that inevitably wind up in the landfill. So I want to teach you some Halloween craft ideas to create compostable, minimal waste Halloween decorations. So for today's project, I'm going to teach you how to make these paper mache bones out of, I would say, at least 95% found or reused material. Okay, so gather your supplies. You're going to need some stiff paper, some shredded paper, some water, and some flour to make some glue. The bones I'm making today can be found in the hand, and we're going to start with that bone, which is the metacarpal bone. So to start the bone, you want to get some stiff paper. I'm using some paper that came in a package of something you bought, and you want to twist it and form it into the shape as close as possible. If you fold over the ends like I'm doing here, that's going to give you those wider bulbous ends that you often see in bones. Now that you've created the base of your bone, you're going to start mixing up the paste. So you need some flour and a little bit of water. Next, grab a dish to add the water and flour mixture to. Add a little bit of flour and then approximately the same amount of water to flour. And then mix the mixture until it's very well combined and forms a thick, sticky paste. I find when creating things in art projects, I like to browse different pictures on Google just to get a sense of how the object's supposed to look. I like to look at more realistic pictures and then do my own interpretation to make it a little less realistic or as animated or as fake as I want it to be. So that is what I did to help prepare for this project, and something you might want to consider doing as well. So once your paste is ready, you want to apply it to that initial structure, just helping to keep it shaped, so put it in between different seams and really sealing down those ends just to help with the shaping so that the paper doesn't have to do all of the work. Next, you want to dip your shredded paper into the flour mixture and then apply it to that base. I'm using shredded paper, again, because this would have just gone into the recycling. It's great to be reused, and then I don't have to pre-shred things, which makes this project a little bit faster too. So you want to continue to secure that bone by using the shredded paper and wrapping it around the twisted, firmer paper to secure it. Then you're just going to continue to add layers as you secure the base and start to form the majority of the shape that you're looking for. By wrapping the shredded paper in this direction, you're also building up the ends further and building up the size of the bone, because really it is quite skinny at this point in time. As you continue to apply the strips of paper, think about three things. You want to think about continuing to secure the base, continuing to cover the base, and shaping your overall bone. When you come across raised bits, you can either hide them by raising the piece next to them, as I'm doing here, or by covering them. I find that putting strips perpendicular to what you're trying to hide is a really good way of hiding or covering up a bump or a divot. Once you're happy with the overall shape and the base is covered, you can continue by applying strips lengthwise, running in the same direction of the length of the bone to create a uniform texture and shape on the bone and hide those spirals that you've created by wrapping paper around the bone widthwise. If you've done your paper mache with anything but white paper, at this point in time you want to do a final layer of plain white paper covering up all that printed paper. Even the shredded paper, I found that the text was coming through even when it was flipped to the opposite end. Okay, so I've left the bones to dry overnight. Now they're quite hard. So you can see I've done a few bones, just having fun with it. I've decided to do a whole finger into the metacarpal. So this bone would be here, this one here, this one here, this one here. You can see this came from a much larger person than me. So I'm pretty happy with how these turned out. Next, we're going to do a little bit of sanding just to help finish off these bones a little bit more. So by sanding, I'm really just trying to aim to take out some of those telltale signs of paper mache to make these look a little bit more realistic. And by sanding here, we're really defining those two bumps that should be on this bone. You don't really need to take out all the globs of flour glue because that kind of, you know, as maybe gory as this sounds, makes it look a little bit more realistic. You probably wouldn't have bones that were completely clean and without leftover flesh on them. So it just depends how realistic and gory you want your bones to look. If you want them to look a little bit more realistic, you can definitely leave on this flour paste because that, to me, makes it look like a bone's come out of a body, wasn't thoroughly cleaned. If you're thinking of these as more of like a prop for like a witch, I don't know, would she spend more time cleaning her bones so they're nice and clean? Guess it depends on the personality of your witch. So yeah, just do as much or as little as you want. It definitely doesn't need to be perfect. So once I was happy with the sanding, I did begin a staining process that I'll tell you in a moment really did not like how it turned out. But how I did this is I used some old coffee grounds that had already been used to brew coffee, placed them in a separate container with a little bit of water to activate them again. I then spread that using my finger onto the bones, and I found that it wasn't creating a dark enough stain. So next what I did was dip my finger into the staining that had already occurred in the bowl where the grounds had dried and used that to further stain the bones. This did create a nice color, but overall, after drying, this is how they turned out. They looked more like they were covered in garden dirt with a bunch of little bits that I tried to brush off, but in the end, to me, they kind of look like poop a little bit. And really, I wanted bones, not some old cat poop from the garden. So I went to work cleaning off all those little bits and some of that staining. I don't necessarily advise this. This did create some lifting of the paper mache. It's a very risky thing to get your paper mache wet again, but it did overall create more of a finish that we had closer to when we just had finished the paper mache. So after letting the bones dry overnight again, I figured they still needed a little bit more detailing to them. So I stole the last bit of Stephen's coffee this morning, and I find the last bits of a cup of coffee tend to be quite dense and concentrated, so this is a great portion of the coffee to use to color your bones. So using a small paintbrush, what you want to do is use the coffee to darken areas that are depressed, that are crevices, or any lower bits of the bone to really highlight the bits that are sticking out. Because if you look at bones, in Halloween decorations or in movies, that's really how they appear in that realistic sense. So anything that's lower than the rest of the bone should be a bit darker, and that's going to make these bones a little bit more realistic. After you're happy with all the low lighting you've done, it's a good idea to give the bones another little sanding. What this is going to do is not only smooth out parts that you may have missed before, but it's also going to further highlight those round bulbous bits of the bone. Really, when you tend to find bones outside, those round bits tend to be smoother and more highlighted. One, because in the body they rub against each other. These are the joints that rub against each other, so a bit smoother. But two, often because animals have knot on them, so you will have smoother bits of the bones. And again, those tend to be the rounded parts that stick out more in the bone. Okay, so let's have a look at the finished product and see what you think. Here they are. I think they're looking a lot more realistic now. Seen witches do this on the movies, that shake them up and tell your fortune. I have no idea how that works, but anyways, here they are, pieced together back into their anatomical positions. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video and like this craft and feel like you want to make it too and be inspired. And hopefully this will just go a long way to reducing some of our Halloween waste. And don't forget, if you're interested in seeing more of our videos, please subscribe to the channel and make sure you hit that bell so it's no longer crossed out, and that will ensure that you get notified every time we post a new video. Okay, take care. Bye.